Welcome back to the Biblical Justice Resources Podcast. We're returning today to an idea raised in Episode 7. The idea that biblical justice resources are not just resources we use to learn more about biblical justice, but also that they are resources used in pursuit of biblical justice. That is to say, when we want to act, to start and complete a project, or create change, those things will require time, energy, money, and more. With this in mind, we're going to think a little more today about fundraising and development with our guest, Jesse Ross. Jesse Ross is the CEO of Mr. Jesse Ross LLC, a leadership development consulting company that focuses on enhancing communication and connection while addressing conflict management, culture, people development, and productivity in an intentional way. In his own words, Jesse has been raising money his whole life. He's been involved in fundraising for nonprofit and for-profit projects of various sizes around the Twin Cities, many of which are helping to seek justice in the community. You'll get to hear more about some of these projects, some of the unique challenges and differences between for-profit and nonprofit fundraising, and an exploration of ways Christians can better serve their neighbors. Now, if you will, join me for this conversation with Jesse Ross. My name's Eric, and this is the Biblical Justice Resources Podcast. Our conversation will begin right after this. The Biblical Justice Resources Podcast is supported by listeners like you at patreon.com/biblicaljusticeresources. If you're interested in supporting the podcast and helping to resource individuals and the church for the pursuit of biblical justice, please consider giving today at patreon.com/biblicaljusticeresources. Again, visit patreon.com/biblicaljusticeresources to help support the podcast. Now on with the show. Jesse, thank you for joining me here today.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
As I've been thinking about this conversation, I've kind of want to start it with the question of like, when do you sleep? Because it feels like I've seen the early morning workout video or photos. You got your like video stuff you post on LinkedIn and other places. I know
Yeah.
you got your own like consulting speaking thing.
Yep.
Got this building, trying to build out a co-working space. And then a couple months ago, I run into you and I'm like, does Jesse have a day job too? How do you get into all this stuff? How do you manage doing all the things you do?
I'll tell you, I don't actually know. I'll be honest with you. Sometimes I think that people overcomplicate things, and so what I try to do is just say I make time for as much as I can, and the things that are really, really, really important, and I don't always do a good job at the other stuff, and so. I've actually always not slept in. With my kid who's now 14, when she didn't sleep as a baby, I kind of got in the habit of getting up super early anyway. And then my next kid also didn't sleep. So it kind of just shifted from like I would watch movies, then I would read a book, then I'd listen to like some motivational stuff, then it was personal development, and then I started working out once they got a little older and actually did sleep. So then I'm like, just, take advantage of the day. So I try to pride myself on doing more by 10 o'clock than most people do in a full day. Sometimes that's not always great. But I also go to bed. I do tell people, like, I went to a volleyball game last night. Man, at 8 o'clock, my body was shutting down and I could feel it. So, so I do actually go to sleep, but I'm grateful for the energy that the Lord gives me.
Yeah. And I mean, with how early I've seen you posting stuff sometimes, I'm like, man, you must go to bed early too, because
Yeah, yeah.
that's not going to work for me going to bed at 11 or whatever and getting up at 4.
Oh yeah, no, no, no. It's not sustainable at all.
So coming back to a couple of things, or maybe just working through the different stuff you do. One of the things I know that's been huge for you in the last couple of years has been this building project, buying this building. Can you kind
hmm
of just talk through what that whole project is, what the vision for it was, and kind of where you're going with it?
Absolutely. So for those who don't know me, I didn't grow up in real estate, didn't grow up knowing anything about real estate, and I'm a youth worker at heart, fundraiser my whole life, and then I stumbled into consulting as I worked at a foundation and was kind of making a transition. So I actually met a group of people who were doing some real estate stuff. They asked me to do some racial equity work with them, which fit in line. But anytime I take on clients, I do my best to learn their business. So fast forward, I learned their business. I met this woman who actually ended up going to the same church that I went to for a second, and she basically just taught me real estate. So she was just like, I was like, how come I don't see more black and brown people in this space? And she was like, great question. And we probably met super consistently for the next year. And she just taught me commercial real estate. And I'm super grateful for her. But that turned into us putting an offer on a smaller building, which I thought was kind of crazy because I'm thinking like these are all test things, right? And she's like, no, let's put an offer in it. And didn't get that building. Five buildings later, or six buildings later, actually, we landed on a building that was literally 100 times bigger than that one. So in 2003, I purchased a commercial real estate building, industrial, that was about 68,000 square feet. Which is really, really big. And it has now 13 units in it, different tenants, and a wide range of people. So we have people who make soap, we have graphic designers, we have woodworkers, we have a healthy foods access nonprofit, a co-working space, kind of all grandpa and grandpa daycare. And so, yeah, I kind of it sounds odd still to this day, but I kind of fell into commercial real estate. And I will say it's been one of the best decisions I've made. It's not easy by at
No, I
all,
bet.
but that is what I've been doing for the last couple of years.
Yeah. As I've seen people who like buy houses and rent out houses, I couldn't imagine doing that. And then you bought this giant building.
Exactly. Exactly. Terrible idea. But my mission is always like, how do you make something better than when you found it? And I take that almost everywhere I go. And so I think about that from the lens of not just commercial real estate, but being a resident, a native of North Minneapolis, a person who cares about business, who cares about people. And so I just figured if I owned a space, I got to control who comes in, who goes out, and that gives me opportunity to make access for other people, hopefully.
Yeah. So a couple of themes that have come up on the podcast so far are this sort of definition of biblical justice as being related to human flourishing. And
Mm,
then another one has been, as it escapes from my mind at the moment, but this move from charity to justice. How do you see this building project playing into those sorts of definitions of justice? And sort of how does, you mentioned the also not as many black and brown individuals in real estate, probably especially up here in Minnesota. How do you
yeah,
see those things contributing here?
that's a great question. Um, I might you might have to reel me in. I'll just be honest.
For
I
sure.
think about this a lot, and so feel free to interrupt me, interject, or whatever, or even challenge. When I think of people talking about biblical justice, I usually think about like what has God, like how has God designed us for his good, right? And peace and wholeness and community collaboration and all that stuff. And so I think it's 2025 or whenever somebody's listening to this podcast, I think that people will always interpret things from the lens that their foundation lays in. And so as a black man, as someone who grew up in the city, as someone who has been around an eclectic group of people, including faith backgrounds, that is how I see it. So I think about charity has always been something that hasn't always been a good word in my community. And so what I've tried to do is say, how do I take those two, right? Biblical justice, charity justice, whatever other people want to call it, and think about opportunities to be the hands and feet of Jesus, but also to maybe restore versus even reconcile, like restore God's vision into places that I don't think people really see God represented, right? Like you don't hear a lot of commercial real estate people talk about biblical justice. And so I took the opportunity to say, hey, if I'm going to own a building, a space, no matter how large or how small, how do I do right by people, right? How do I live out God's calling through ownership and opportunity and access to make space for other people, which I feel like is our responsibility in every aspect that we do. But that's just how I view it. And so I'm not really sure if I answered your question, but that's just kind of my take on it of there are ways to give back, and I also think it doesn't always have to be through a nonprofit.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, whether I like the answer, so I guess that works. But
Yeah.
speaking of the you mentioned nonprofit there. I think where I ran into you is a nonprofit space. I would guess that the building is a more for profit, not a nonprofit space. What do you see as differences between those two spaces when it comes to whether it be advancing God's work in the world, advancing justice in the world? What are the differences you see there?
Yeah, I mean, so when I say that too, I don't want people to take that as nonprofits are bad because I don't believe
Right.
that they are at all. In Minnesota, where we live, the moniker of the land of 10,000 lakes or the land of 10,000 nonprofits actually does exist. I think that there are a lot of nonprofits that exist for good reason. There are also a lot of nonprofits that don't exist for good reason and are kind of competing, which really makes it feel like we're taking resources away. And there's a lot of people doing some of the same work in the same area and have the same donors, funders, whatever that might be. So I chose for profit because within the Black and Brown community, I think there is this I don't know, wives' tale, folklore, whatever you want to call it, that you have to have a nonprofit in order to do good. And I just wanted to dispel that myth. Like you can run a for-profit business and still do good, still do right by people, still give back to the community, still try to make a difference, but it always doesn't have to run under the guise of a nonprofit. I think a lot of people who use nonprofits for the negative way or maybe non-positive ways, shall I say, um, they use it as a loophole in order to get money, in order to take resources and to do whatever they want. And I just didn't want to run through a bunch of extra hoops just to do good. And so I wanted to kind of prove that to myself first and foremost, but then also have a model of what that could look like in community and in the business community amongst not just Black and brown people, but people in general. And I tend to know now a lot of people who run successful for-profit businesses who have an arm where they give back. And sometimes it is through a separate nonprofit, and sometimes it's directly through their business. And so I was like, okay, this is possible.
Yeah. Excuse me. So thinking about that then, what would you say is something that is possible in a for-profit space that isn't possible in nonprofit, and then vice versa?
Mm, that's a great question. Most recently, I have thought about so nonprofits are not built to make large amounts of money. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't attract large amounts of money as far as donors or funding or grant opportunities. But like and there are some nonprofits that have very high salaries, but they're not as common as like if you were the amount of nonprofits that exist and the amount of executive directors that make a really good salary. Good is relative, of course. um it just doesn't really compute in my brain, and so my hope is that I can employ people, livable wage jobs, opportunities to grow and build a business that can scale. Maybe we sell it, maybe it brings somebody in that can take it to the next level, but it gives kind of an unlimited cap on how much money someone is able to make. And that is not focused on me. That's actually focused on the people who I want to employ. I also think for profit gives an opportunity that you can sell that as an asset, right? Like we get into the conversation about um, whether it's generational wealth or whether it is building and scaling and growing something. Most times you can't do that with a nonprofit because of the legal ramifications of how the structure is built. And so I again didn't come from that world, but as I've grown to know and learn and think, one of the things that I do want to do is take something and sell it for a higher amount, and be able to make some money off of that in order to go do the next thing. But I also would like, I run into a lot of people because of the people work that I do inside organizations. And I know a lot of really good people who don't love the place that they work at, right? And this is, I'm not going to name anybody, of course, but I think that my idea of having a for-profit company also exists to say, man, there's an opportunity to take some really good people and create a workplace that isn't toxic, that isn't abusive or obsessive, and we can do some really good work together and be able to make some money to take care of the needs that we have and take care of the community also. So that's kind of how I see it more recently. I think that if you ask me tomorrow, I might think about it from a different perspective. Just because I think it's so wide and vast of the opportunities. But again, I don't want people to hear that nonprofit work isn't good because I absolutely think it's good and necessary. Um, but I've been in nonprofit work my entire life, and there's just a lot of um, rigor around what you can and cannot do, what money can and cannot be used for. And I just decided to go a different route.
Yeah. And I've seen that. I've spent uh, the majority of my work life in nonprofit spaces too. So
Yeah.
I think that I could echo a lot of that too. I've been wondering too, with knowing that you've had to do some fundraising to get through this building project, and now you're going through with the co-working space as well, fundraising versus the nonprofit space fundraising there. Do you see a difference in the both the type of person who is willing to give to each of those places and the amount of money that they're willing to give? And some of what's motivating that is that the question that is that I know someone who ran for public office, a devout Christian, a lot of those principles coming into their political work platform, stuff like that. And they said that almost exclusively their money was coming from secular funding because
Mm.
for whatever reason, Christians have this idea about where money should be going or not. Is that something that you see playing into each of those spaces?
I do see it played in those spaces. That has actually been a challenge that I have been trying to navigate in the more recent space. I started um, just like with a background, right? I worked for a Christian organization, international outreach, youth outreach organization, and then I went to go work at a foundation, at a community foundation. And so I got to see the best of both worlds, right? I started raising money first. Excuse me. I saw this kind of donut hole effect of I did work in the city, but most of our resources came from outside the city. And most of the resources came from people that did not look like me as well. When I went to the foundation, it was almost flipped upside down. Most of the resources that went into the city were some people that actually lived in the city, some people that did not. But the sole focus was the city of Minneapolis. And the money that we were let's just say our budget was, $700,000. We had a small pot of $4 million that we had to give back to the community, just for that aspect. We probably had assets over, a couple $100 million, which I still think is crazy, by the way. So it was the way that I learned it, it was different, but also I would say is very accurate to what you described. I think that politics is a whole different space that I'm not well versed on enough to even dive into on the fundraising aspect as much. But I do think that Christians are conditioned to give in certain areas, in certain spaces, and in certain ways. Inside the church, missions, missions or outreach, and then of course, folks, things that are focused around youth. So when you think about something like real estate or something like business development, it's not as common, but I still think there's a lane and a window for that good to be done because I believe that there are really good, successful Christians or believers in the workplace who run businesses, who have been successful, who have navigated different things and are actively involved and have a heart to help people. I just don't think it's taught inside those institutions, including the Christian colleges or the churches or whatever those may be. But I think it's a great opportunity for us to think about what does it mean to spread resources to the least and the lost, or far and few in between in non-traditional places? Because I think it's like a both and versus an absolute.
Yeah. That's some of the stuff you just said raised to mind some of my own like call, if you will.
Hmm.
Because when I see people in the business space, like that's not my calling. And so it just like doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't compute. And I
Yeah.
wonder for like people on pastoral staffs, how much that also rings true. Like it's difficult to teach because it's not what they see as their calling. And so it's not as understood to them. I don't necessarily have a question for you. I'm just talking off the
No.
top of my head here. But
No, that's a good perspective though. I do think there has I like it to what I call experience and exposure, right? If you have experience or are exposed to certain areas or spaces, you kind of know a little bit more and feel more comfortable versus the spaces that you haven't been exposed to. So I absolutely think that it's true. I think the reason why I said the both and is I think that I think we are living in a time where we see or have seen that it's gonna take more than just like the dollars in the church. It's gonna take more than just the pastors. Like we talk about the education system a lot. And we know that teachers are doing good work, God's work, right? Stuff that I personally don't feel like that is my calling in that form. And also, I can still walk alongside teachers and students, understanding the gaps and what's necessary. So I do think it's it's a way of thinking about how do we do this thing together versus this is only the thing that I know and the only way for sure.
yeah. I wonder then with some of that experience and exposure in your own journey here, you said earlier that when you come on to help with consulting with someone, you try to learn their business. Is
Mhm.
there like a similar process with each different business that you've been in of how you learn that and what does that look like for you?
That's a great question. I have a process. I don't know if I've actually put it down on paper, but a lot of it is really just asking genuine questions. Like, the top line is always like, tell me what the business is, what do you actually do, who do you serve, why'd you get into this, how long you been doing it. Most of the groups that I work with, I would say now, because I've been doing this for a while, they're pretty similar, so I kind of understand the business aspects of it. But it helps me um frame questions around like who you are, why you do what you do, who do you serve, why do you serve them, what people say, what do you offer, and then what are the return outcomes or ROI on, if someone gives $1 or if you serve a student, how does that student or that person's life change? It helps me understand the like foundation. So then, usually when people are bringing me in to solve a problem, whether it's like strategy or productivity or better work culture, I can kind of find the common ground that everybody came for, right? We came to work in this youth organization because we care about young people. We came to work at this advertising agency because we value creative and the energy around that. And what does that look like? Or we want to do good. So I try to walk people through like those steps. But the learning piece actually for me is selfishly for me. I just love to learn, but it also helps me um ask questions that they're not typically being asked, right? And so when I run them kind of through this process of learning their organization, I see a consistent theme of being reminded of like, oh yeah, you're right. Oh, we used to do this thing and we got away from it. Or man, I really remember the good old days or whatever those things are. And so it turns out that it helps me, but it actually ends up helping them at the same time. And the question I like to ask, which you didn't ask, but I'll kind of add this, is there anything that I can do to serve you? Right? That question has opened up so many doors and random conversations, even just in business, because sometimes someone might hire me to come in and do maybe some executive coaching, but what they really just need is like a trusted advisor or a friend that is not going to retaliate if they give them some information. Or honestly, a lot of people just share the most random stuff and I encourage them. I excite them. I make sense of some stuff that might seem like chaos. And so it is a learning piece for me, but it also gives them an opportunity to have a platform to just say, hey, this is a safe space. So I know that wasn't part of the last part wasn't really part of your question, but the format I think is pretty basic. I think it's rooted in intentionality and curiosity.
Yeah, those are both good. And I may not have asked that question in that moment, but I think it is a place that we need to get to,
Yeah,
especially as we're not just you and me here, but Christians in general. I think, what does it look like to actually go out and serve others
absolutely.
in ways that we maybe haven't thought of? And so that
Absolutely.
intentionality and curiosity plays into that too. So I really
Absolutely.
appreciate that. Also, selfishly, that's part of why I started this podcast. I finally, like, I had this idea forever and finally was like, if for no other reason than I am going to be learning, that is a good enough reason to start talking to people.
I love it. I actually have I'll tell you something that I haven't told most people. I started a podcast a long time ago for the anti-racism conversations, and then I wanted to shift it so it wasn't just about that. And I've been sitting on it for like 3 years, and I just finally recorded a couple episodes not too long ago for the exact same reason. I was like, it's okay to be selfish and just I want to learn. I want to learn from people that I know. So I actually appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder then going back to you asking different people in spaces what it looks like to serve them, is there a common thing that comes up that's sort of a thread that people who are listening to this podcast could be like, I know right off the bat that this is a great way to
Mm.
go in and help people or serve people?
You know, the most common answer that I get is nobody ever asked me that question. And that is telling because, well, for a few reasons. One, I think that we are conditioned to give, give, give. And so it's hard for us to receive.
Yeah,
Um,
especially in Minnesota.
Especially in Minnesota, yes. Yeah. I also think that we are in a time now where I think a lot of people are tired, and it reminds me of, when in 2020, COVID, a lot of stuff happening all at once, trying to manage a lot of things, just a little different. It feels like people are feeling that way. And so I think people are just running and going and just doing. And selfishly, I think that people want help, but are afraid because they also recognize other people are running and doing and going just like that too. And so the common answer is usually I don't know, or nobody ever asked me that question. And I think it stops them in their tracks often. Um, I think the other part of it is people don't believe me. It's like, what's the catch at the end? And I was telling somebody the other day, I think every person needs at least one person in their life that doesn't want anything from them other than to see them succeed. And so I get the privilege and honor of being that person for a lot of people. Um, and I'm honored to be able, I feel like that is it, I don't think I read that in a book somewhere. I genuinely felt like God told me to ask the question that way, and I ask it consistently that way, and it either throws people off or it shows the intentionality. Some people will be like, I don't know, man, I'm gonna come right back. I'll come back to you later. But I think it creates this open curiosity of like, what could I what could you do? And sometimes it's like, yo, let's do this. Let's catch up on a regular. Sometimes it's I have a question that I actually need answered. For a lot of people, I end up telling them stuff that they don't want to hear. Or it's like connect. It comes up in random questions. So no common themes other than nobody knows how to answer it.
Yeah. And as you were answering and saying that no one, a lot of people don't know or haven't been asked that question, before you even finished your thought, I was like, so people should probably be asking the question, but then also be willing to actually follow up and do the thing. And then you're
Yes.
like, people are like, don't believe that they're willing to do the thing. So,
Exactly. It's crazy. Like you would think. I mean, it's like the here's the thing. I know you run into this because you live in Minnesota and also just understand like how you doing? Some people don't actually care.
yeah,
They don't want to hear the answer or whatever. And then there's people you run by and they're like, no, how are you actually doing? And you're like, oh, you actually want me to tell you. I wasn't ready for that. And so I think that unfortunately that's just common. And so I try to be as non-cliche as possible.
Yeah, I play around with that sometimes too.
Yeah,
You you kind of have to have a read sometimes of does the person actually want to know, or
right.
do I want to surprise them a little bit by actually being a little more honest than fine?
Exactly. You're like, oh, okay. Thanks for telling the truth.
That's yeah. Oh, well, that's a conversation for another time.
Yeah.
Thinking too, then not just about us being in Minnesota, but us also being in a church space. I mean, there are so many different iterations of what the church looks like, but in the church experiences you have had, what are ways that this conversation is relevant to the church? I mean, we've talked about some of this, but in terms of like the reaching out and serving, it seems like the place that church is the place that that should be emanating from. Do you
Hmm.
see that as being the case, or what are some ways that church can grow in maybe serving in the places that you've been working in?
That's a good question. My answer is different, I think, than most people, but hopefully authentic. I didn't grow up in the church. And so I never saw the church as like this golden light that everybody else talks about or the way that people talk about it. It was just kind of a group of people. They, knew each other and were present maybe in their building. And as I became, more strong, like as a believer and strong in my faith, I started realizing the church is actually not the four walls, but it's everything outside of that, right? Um, and so I think that people in the church and the church body particularly, our job is to go not just to make disciples but to like be good neighbors, right, to show up in the spaces where we feel like we are called to, because the church is made up of a bunch of folks who are sick who want to get well, a bunch of folks who are successful who want to give back, who want to move from success to significance. And I think that is our job, to be like the hands and feet of Jesus in these places. And so I actually get frustrated a lot because I don't feel like the church, capital C, big C, is actually doing as much as they could, because we're so concerned about making the wrong decisions, right? It goes back to that experience and exposure. I often get in trouble in church spaces, I'll just say it that way. Because I didn't grow up in the church, I just see things differently. And because I'm not running a nonprofit, I'm running a for-profit, I see things differently. And I don't think the church as a whole does business like business. We do business like a church. And I think we miss out on a lot of opportunities because of that as well. So I think that there are endless spaces that we can infiltrate and have influence, huge positive influence in, if we were willing to just go versus um proselytize or or prophetize, whatever you want to call it, about the
Yeah.
problem and talk about the problem all the time versus like let's go be the solution and see what happens.
Yeah. I'm so glad you started that with from your experience being outside the church, not seeing the church as the shining light that people inside the church see it as. Because that's the thing I've run into recently with the way different Christians I've interacted with talk is like,
Hmm.
I don't think people outside the church see us the way that you want them to see us.
Right.
And it's causing a problem, not just a messaging problem, but an influence problem. And what are we able to do in the world problem? Like if we don't
Yeah.
understand what people outside the church actually think, we're not going to be able to interact with them the way that we need to.
Yeah. I
But the
agree.
second piece of that I appreciate you bringing up is being a neighbor to people. Like that's the
Mhm.
responsibility of the church too, because another thing that at the church that you and I go to, I know that you've had a big influence in is a ministry that we have that you've said at other churches would probably be called outreach or something. You've been really intentional at saying we need to continue to call it neighboring.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about that vision behind what that ministry aspect can be?
Yeah. I actually I don't talk about this enough. So I appreciate the question, and I need to actually start thinking about this in different ways. So growing up, this is where it actually came from. Growing up, I actually bought a house. The house that I live in now is like 3 blocks from where I grew up. And I think that I had the coolest neighborhood ever, right? And most of that was because I knew almost everybody on the block. Now, I didn't know that that was like normal in other places, right? As a kid, just like I know all my neighbors. That's crazy. But I had some really cool neighbors, some really good neighbors, a very eclectic, multicultural group of folks that lived on my block, around the corner, and what have you. And when I moved out of the city, or out of North Minneapolis for a second, it was just kind of bouncing around trying to figure it out. I recognized I didn't know my neighbors. And it didn't feel like they really wanted to get to know me. And so I would try my best to like speak and do all these things. And I was in the areas that were not North Minneapolis, and it just felt foreign. It felt distant. It felt very closed off. And so when I moved back, I have one of the dopest, but like most unlikely neighbors ever. I won't say his actual name just to, I don't actually think it matters, but he engages in illegal activity often. He, um, is actually from California. He looks Hispanic, has an African American rooted name, and he's a biker, tattoos and the whole deal. And he's like the best neighbor ever. Now, the running joke is he's the best neighbor ever because he does illegal activity, but I don't actually know if that's true. I actually think he's just a good human. He's a really good dude. And so when I was kind of going through the outreach stuff that we were doing in our church, we were talking about like what does it mean to like get to know the people in the neighborhood? And I was like, well, who actually knows their neighbors? And I kind of used him as an example without mentioning his name. And that's where it came from. It was just like, I actually don't want to move because I will miss him as a neighbor. Like, that's what connection is. That's what community should be. That's what the church should be. And this is a guy who doesn't love Jesus, not interested in Jesus, but is all about safety, all about security. My kids have been locked out of the house, and he's like called me, and he's got PlayStation. So he's like, hey man, I fed him some lunch and stuff. Hope that was okay. And I'm like, that's great. Like, I appreciate that. That's what I felt like we should be as the hands and church and the hands and feet of the church. And so I just kind of used that as an example and just said, like, when people say outreach, it feels like a program. It feels like a thing that we do, not who we are. And so, what if we called it neighboring and it was genuinely about like, let's just be a good neighbor, a good human to the people that are in proximity, closeness to us. And they were like, oh, that's a great idea. And I was like, I mean, I don't think it's that great, but sure, let's run with it. And that's kind of how we got there. A lot of my stuff, man, is just like it's very practical because I think in the church, but also as humans, we make things way more complicated than it needs to be. Like people want to know, do you know their name? Do you recognize them? Are you familiar with them? Are you a nice person? Is there something that you can do to help them move along wherever their journey is? Outside of that, nobody really cares about anything else because all the other stuff is just superficial. So yeah, that's where that came from.
Yeah. And now we've come to the part of the conversation where it's not just good for this to be for other people listening to hear this, it's good for me to be hearing this as well. Because that's a growth area for me.
That's okay. Me
That's
too.
a we just had a thing yesterday where someone probably stole a Kia and drove it and parked it on our street, whatever.
Yep.
And one of the traffic control guys showed up yesterday and was parked behind my neighbor's car. So the neighbor
Hmm.
went out. It wasn't the car that was involved. My neighbor went out to be like, what's going on? Figure out if it's his car. And I'm walking past with our dog, and I was like, you good? He's like, yeah, we're good. Stuff. It's probably one of the longest conversations I've had with this guy, which is it's an area of growth for me.
Yeah. Yep. But you know that and you recognize that. I think that that's a further step than most people are even willing to go. Like now what you do with that, right, is your journey and your walk, but I think that most people won't even ask the question, won't even engage, won't even stop to say like, dang, I realize like that is a growth area for me. People are like, wait, I don't want to touch it. It's uncomfortable. Leave me alone. Change the topic real quick. So good job for you, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, and I will work on continuing to grow.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that the place that I ran into you a couple months ago, and that was at the community center in St. Paul, Hallie Q. Brown.
Mhm.
What is uh what is your sort of role? I know development is like your title or whatever. What does that actually look like working at a community center?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, first of all, working at the community center, social service agency, it doesn't matter what your title is, you better just be ready for the day. So, man, on my job at Hallie Q Brown is really to one, enhance and increase our fundraising capacity and ability, right? And so we think about most nonprofits sustain themselves by grant funding or individual donors, large gifts, whatever that might be. So that's one piece. The second piece, though, is to develop relationships and partnerships with people that sustains the work that we do. So, like currently, at the time of this recording, we have a eye clinic that is in town. They do a lot of international work, but then I guess randomly do some work in the States. And I guess we were on a list of 100 or 200 people that one of the staff members called, and he said I was actually the only person that called him back, which is kind of a core principle of mine of being a good human. Is like I might not always be able to answer the phone, but I'll always try to call you back. Now I might be late or like email you back because there's just a lot happening. So I called him back, and he told me that they offer free eye exams, free eye glasses they wanted to serve at least 150 people, and we were like, for free. And we're like, yeah. I'm like, hey man, this sounds like something we would love to do. And so over a series of a couple meetings and months, we just coordinated, and we've been able to serve as of today's our last day. As of yesterday, we served 145 um people, young people, kids, elders, aging adults, corporate professionals, folks who are highly mobile in transit, just everybody. And I actually went through it. I actually have the glasses right here. Um, they're not like terrible glasses either.
Yeah.
So what my job is really to like find those types of relationships and partnerships and bring them in and figure out like how do we do good work together. And so long answer, but big job. It's not just raising money, it's not just asking people for money, although I've been doing that my whole life. It's about finding those connections and those pieces of, hey, you have I'm gonna take a quick segue into something that is actually a foundation of what I do. I used to work for an outreach organization, and I used to recruit volunteers. And this is the same principle that I actually use that I don't talk about because I just remembered as we were talking. I would always say, "Hey man, we have a bunch of kids that need to be served. And then we have a bunch of adults that actually want to volunteer with these young people. As long as I can figure out that equation, like God will do the rest. God will close the gaps. He will fill the need. He'll make the connections. But I know I got a bunch of people that need to be served, and I got a bunch of people that want to do the serving. If I can just get y'all in the same room, the Lord will work the rest of it out. And that's what my job is get the right people in the room, figure out what the Lord is going to do. And a lot of times that's involving laughter and service and some fun stuff. And we make sure that it's culturally relevant and competent. But it's a good time. It's a big job, but it's actually a really good time.
Yeah. And that probably speaks some. I don't know if we fully answered the what nonprofits are able to do versus for profit, but that answers some of that, I think,
Yeah,
bringing that in here.
I definitely didn't answer that fully.
So then, for people who are in the nonprofit space trying to either grow development, think better about development,
Mhm.
what are some things that you would say to them that are helpful to understand? And then maybe what's something surprising that people wouldn't necessarily think of goes into this?
Got it. I think that they absolutely need to understand that development is purely based off relationships. Now, what I think they're surprised about is I think people think about relationships as a value of financial currency, and that is not always the case. It is some part of the job, but that's not always the case. Everybody knows someone. And then the other piece of that is who are you willing to get to know? So I had a mentor a long time ago who used to say, When I worked with young people, he'd say, "Hey, do you love the work that you do, the kids that you serve?" And I'd say, "Yes." He'd ask me again, "Do you love the work and the kids that you do, or kids that you serve, and the work that you do?" And I'd be like, "Yeah." Ask me again, Jesse, "Do you love the work that you do and the kids that you serve?" And I'm like, "Yeah." "Why do you keep asking me that?" And he was like, "Because if you really do, you'd be willing to talk to anybody about it." And I kind of paused and I was kind of frustrated. And we were having a conversation about like going to talk to a person that I did not know, that didn't come from my neighborhood, that kind of was a little socially awkward, but he was trying to dispel like it doesn't have anything to do with any of that. It's about the heart and the passion for the work that you do, that you would be willing to go just like Jesus went to the ends of the earth to make sure that we were, taken care of and saved and we knew the gospel and all this stuff. And I was like, I don't like that, but you're right. So that's the surprising thing that I would say is I think that people it might be predominantly white. It might be uncomfortable. You might not like asking people for money. And a lot of that is because most of us didn't grow up with that experience and exposure. But I think you'd be surprised that if you have a chance to hear the heart of where people are and how much they may care about a neighborhood or a topic or an issue, and how willing they would be to make an introduction to you or to brainstorm about some ideas, and how much it actually has nothing to do with you and has everything to do with the folks that you are serving. So that's been a huge highlight that I get to hopefully share with people and that people get to learn. Uh, is it intimidating? Absolutely. Is it easy? Absolutely not. But I do think the work that we get to do, literally get to do, not have to do, um, should be that important that we get a chance to talk to people and we recognize that now I get to benefit from the relationship because of the place that I'm connected to. That actually is a win-win for me, just like this podcast, right? You get to learn, I get to learn, we get to hear each other, somebody's listening to this. So I hope that development isn't scary. I do think the surprising piece is people think it's relationship currency as financial gain, and I look at it as, oh yeah, I can make a phone call to some people I know, and they would love to come over to St. Paul because they've followed me, because they know I'm gonna give my all to whatever those things are.
Yeah. We've identified growth area number two for me. Being willing to talk with anybody about the stuff
Yeah.
that I'm working on and love. So
And also in your
this
way
keeps coming
too.
up.
I
Yeah.
wanna I wanna also highlight that because not everybody is a in front of 1,000 people type of influence, right? Somebody listening to this is really great at email, really great at intimate conversations, one-on-one or one-on-two. And other people are like, put me in a large room and let me work. All right. I think it's a both and.
Yeah. We're coming close on time here, so we'll wrap up here pretty shortly. Potentially with this question, as I've been thinking about in some of the places I've worked, development work, a lot of the people we are raising money from are not the people who are benefiting from the programming. Uh, with that in mind, what does it look like to raise money from someone who's not benefiting from the programming? What have you seen that
Mhm.
is effective? How do you reach people and say, hey, this thing isn't going to benefit you immediately, but realistically, it is going to benefit you because it's benefiting the community around you.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge with that is what I've seen in my experience is most people who have been successful, right, air quotations, in whatever their lane, industry, thing, they recognize the hard work that it took. They recognize the accolades that they may have received, and they recognize the return is usually some type of access, level of notoriety and financial gain. And then when they get that, because they work so hard for it, most of the people that I have met, I'm not saying all, but most of the people I've met also get there and go, there's got to be more to it than just this. Or there's a responsibility now that I've arrived at this place to also either help or do more or even if that's not the good moral cause, it's like I have to find tax shelters for the way that I've benefited from this. And so I take the framework of like, those are successful people. And then this is a thing that can move you from that thing to significance. So significance might mean I'm giving back. Significance might mean I am doing a good thing and learning about a community and an issue that I didn't even know about or was unaware or did not directly um, encounter in my journey. But also significance can literally be, hey, I needed a tax shelter and you provided a tax shelter for me. Therefore, great. This is a great partnership. And so I've tried to take the limits off of what um, I would like to see and try to get in touch with what's their end goal. So moving people from success to significance is kind of the framework that I use. But learning about their what significance would look like or mean for them has kind of been that journey. So yeah, it's challenging though because I think people um who don't directly impact or aren't directly impacted by that um thing, place, whatever they're giving to, there has to be some type of connection. And sometimes you as the person or me as the person are the only connection. I think I had to be okay with that being true. Um, and other times it's okay, I'm actually not the reason. If I can get you to see these young people, if I can get you to see the bags that the food that we're giving away or whatever the thing is, then it might click. And so I try to just find out what that is. And I think that it has worked so far.
Yeah. That's that's an interesting takeaway for me too. It's again, I'm learning as much as anyone else who's listening, so
I
I
love
appreciate that.
it.
Any last thoughts on any of the stuff we've talked about or anything we haven't talked about that you want to impart for people listening?
um, Nothing specific. I think the thing that comes to mind is I always hope that people that are listening to anything, whether it's just you, me, um, information, other podcasts, whatever that might be, that they actually take the information and apply it versus go right on to the next thing. I think we are in an information overload stage, and I know you as a human don't want to give people more information than they need. And so I appreciate about you and the intentionality. But I hope whoever is listening hears something and goes, let me go apply that. Let me get, like you said, like, hey, this is learning thing for me. I hope that someone hears that because that's what I think about. Like, I can't be the person that I am without applying this information as well. And there's probably, I know that there's like two conversations that I need to have with somebody and say, you know what? I was supposed to get back to you about this thing. I dropped the ball. Here's what I think we should do related to some of the questions that you actually asked me. So I just hope that people apply the information. And if there is anything that I can do, Eric, to serve you, but also to serve anyone who's listening, feel free to let me know. Just know I might be late to responding, but I will respond.
I appreciate that offer. And also maybe just as my closing remark, I was thinking about that either yesterday or today of this podcast can't just be more entertainment.
Mm.
We don't need we don't there's so much of that. So hopefully people are able to pull something away from any one of the episodes that they find. Thank you for listening to the Biblical Justice Resources podcast. This podcast is hosted, produced, and edited by Eric Beck. To learn more about how you can be resourced for the pursuit of biblical justice, visit our website at biblicaljusticeresources.com.